Hello everyone, this is Christina Stocks, and I'm going to be walking you through my Procedure 3 Miscue Analysis that I conducted with Cadence. Before you do your Procedure 3 Miscue Analysis with your student, it's a good idea to give them a Burke reading interview. This way you know what strategies your student has when they come to something they don't know, what they believe that good readers do, and it also gives you a general idea about how they feel about themselves as readers. I'm going to start by giving you some background knowledge on Cadence. Cadence is in 4th grade and has struggled all year long with reading on grade level material and comprehending grade level material. When Cadence was in 3rd grade, her teacher recommended her to our child study team, which is basically our school's way of sending students down the special education referral track. She went all the way through that process with several interventions tried and finally got to being assessed. She did not qualify for special education services based on IQ discrepancy. This year, Cadence has participated in several RTI groups. She was for most of the year in a RTI group for reading comprehension, and she also participated in an intervention group on phonics. My school utilizes the Readers and Writers Workshop, which has given me several opportunities to meet with Cadence throughout the year. During our individual reading conferences, I have listened to Cadence read, and I have also offered her several strategies she can try when she gets stuck. She also participates in a book club. She meets with myself and 4 other students to talk about a book that they are reading together. She seems to really enjoy this collaboration and sharing of ideas. So despite how much trouble Cadence has had with reading, she isn't a student who seems to dislike reading. I decided to choose Cadence for my Procedure 3 Miscue Analysis because I wanted to see if the strategies I had been teaching her were evident in her reading, and I wanted to see how she felt about herself as a reader. This is my recording and retelling of the conversation I had with Cadence when we did her Burke reading interview. Something that came very apparent to me as I was listening to her talk about her strategies was that she really didn't have any strategies other than sounding it out. She did mention 2 strategies. She either asked, "What does the word say?" or "I try to figure it out." And I know that those are conversations that she has with herself. But I did want to know what she meant by figuring it out. And she did tell me that she meant, well, that was sounding out the words. When I asked her if there was anything else she knew how to do, she responded after a long pause, "Not really." So I know that sounding out is her go-to strategy with reading, and sometimes it works for her, and sometimes it doesn't. Another thing that became apparent to me while I was talking with Cadence about her reading was that she is a word-based reader. When she described someone who was a good reader, she picked out her sister. And she told me that her sister was a good reader because she gets a lot of words right and she doesn't have to think about what this word says. So for Cadence, good reading is all about accuracy. So I asked Cadence what she would do if she knew somebody was having trouble reading. And again, she gives me a word-based answer. I would ask them if they needed help, and I would try sounding it out with them, or I would do what you do. So one of the things I wanted to know from Cadence is if she's using any of the strategies that I had taught her to help her get through the words in the text. She talked a little bit about using a note card. She calls it the card trick right down here. So the card trick is basically a chunking strategy that I've given her because she seems to really struggle with multisyllabic words. So she knows and is comfortable with that strategy. So I did ask her if that was another trick that she could use or another strategy she could use while reading, and she responded that, yeah, that could have been something that she could have said to that previous question of what does she do when she gets stuck. She couldn't think of any strategies that I would use differently other than the card trick, which was a bit troublesome to me because of all of the work I've done with her all year long on comprehending and making meaning from stories. Again, throughout this interview, there were multiple instances where she talked about getting the words right or figuring out what the word says. When she first learned how to read, she was telling me that I knew what the letters said, and I tried making it make sense. And so I was thinking, okay, well, maybe we're moving on into some meaning-based reading. So I asked her what it meant when she said she was trying to make it make sense. And she said, like what the word says. So Cadence does believe that she is a good reader, although her response wasn't really enthusiastic. It was more like, yeah, I do. But she feels that she can get better at reading by not asking for help. Because I think for her, she equates asking for help as not understanding what the word says on the page, and asking for help means sounding out. So for her to get better at reading by not asking for sounding out would probably be a big deal for her, especially since that is what she is focused on with her word-based meaning. But we're hoping to move her into some more meaning-based discussion, and you will hear that when I talk with you about my RMA I did with her. I spent a lot of time talking about what I learned from the Burke reading interview, but I feel that is a vital part of the Procedure 3 Miscue Analysis, so I wanted to spend some time going through what I learned about my reader through that process. Now, the second part of doing a Procedure 3 Miscue Analysis is having a typed transcript and a retelling guide ready to go when you are recording your student reading. I went ahead and created my own retelling guide and my own transcript because I wanted to have the opportunity to go through that whole process of what a reading specialist would do. Plus, I had a really difficult time finding texts that were either a complete chapter with a beginning, middle, and an end, or a picture book that wasn't too long for my students to read so that I didn't have to record them for half an hour. I finally settled on Arthur Turns Green for Cadence. She did read a book at a different Lexile level, one that was lower. The Lexile level of 580 is pretty low. By the time students get to the end of fourth grade, the Lexile scale is like an 820, and she's reading at a 580 right now with the text Arthur Turns Green. I'm going to give you an opportunity to listen to Cadence read some of Arthur Turns Green, and from that you can hear how some of the words she reads are a struggle and what strategy she tries when she gets stuck. You can start.
Arthur's class was working in the school garden when Mr. Ratburn began to explain their next class project. Let's call it the Big Green Margin, he said. Your job is to find ways to make our plants a better place to live. Well, we'll present all of your ideas at a school family night.
On this page, you will notice a number of regressions, and this sentence right here that says, Arthur walked around the house making knots and talking to himself. And you'll notice the long pause she made here before machine again, which she tried throughout the text in 3 different ways, and other substitutions here that do not make a lot of sense. I thought this page was particularly interesting for a couple of reasons. She again looks at this word cell, and after a couple of different tries ends up just calling it a call phone. But there were some tough words on this page. Plant a tree to celebrate a family event. We just had student-led conferences not that long ago, and our school's focus is on the 4 C's: communication, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking. And collaborate was one of those words she had to learn how to read. So she didn't read through this to see if it made sense. She just said a long word that started with a C. Again, walk, carpool, ride your bike. Walk careful would maybe make sense, but it doesn't make sense in this story. Again, she regressed, but she almost got this word fluorescent correctly. She was very close. And again, you'll notice that 7-second pause before she attempted to say that word. This is the retelling guide that I created for Arthur Turns Green. She did a really good job finding the setting. She got every single setting correct, which is telling because it changes quite a bit in the story. Some of the characters she left out. Dad was a big part of the story. Mr. Ratburn wasn't a huge part of the story, but was also a main character kind of in the background. I did let her count if she said, like, preschool friends, like DW's friends. She didn't give them the specific name, and Arthur's friends didn't give them a specific name. But she did get the events, most of the events right as well. She left off some events that I thought were important into the story, but her comprehension score on this text wasn't too bad, so I thought this was a pretty good fit book for her. She got a comprehension score of a 78%, and you can see a lot of the questions I asked her and her responses I recorded on this page.
On the typed transcript, you will notice that I left a line to the right that has 3 letters. The first letter will stand for syntactic acceptability, which means, does it sound like language? The second letter is designated for semantic acceptability, which means, does it make sense? And the last letter would be for meaning change. Does it change the author's meaning? On the meaning change, there's a possibility of having a Y, an N, or a P. P would stand for probably. For a sentence that has a YYY coding, that means as the reader left it, the sentence makes sense syntactically, semantically, and yes, it changes the meaning that the author intended. For a sentence that's coded YYN, what that means is as the reader left it, the sentence is syntactically acceptable, it's semantically acceptable, and it doesn't change the meaning of the author's text. For a sentence that would be coded YYP, for example, that would mean yes, it's syntactically acceptable, yes, it's semantically acceptable, and it probably changes the author's intended meaning. Cadence didn't have very many YYPs, so most of hers were YYNs or YYYs. After you complete all of your work on your transcript and your retelling guide, what you're going to do is do the miscue tally form. On this sheet, you're going to record what sentence a student made a miscue on, what the student said, what the text said, if it was self-corrected, if it made no meaning change, probably some, or no meaning change at all. And then you code for graphic similarity. If there's a high graphic similarity, some graphic similarity, or no graphic similarity at all. And you will tally all of this information and put it on the reader's profile page. It's important to note that you cannot code for graphic similarity with partials, insertions, or omissions. I like to think of the reader profile page as a snapshot of your student's reading abilities. The very first thing you'll see on there is the sentence coding, YYN, YYP, YYY, which I discussed earlier what those things meant. And you give a percentage score for each of those: syntactic acceptability, semantic acceptability, and meaning change. You're also going to see your comprehension score that you got from your retelling guide, and that miscue tally form that I discussed with self-corrections, no meaning change, partial meaning change, and with meaning change. And your graphic similarity. So it's going to take all those pieces that make up the procedure 3 and put that information all on one page. And the bottom is left for you to make some comments about their reading. Maybe they're tracking the page with their finger. Maybe their reading's kind of choppy. That information you would record in the comments section, as well as things that your student did well while they were reading.
You will notice that some promising things, she doesn't have any yes, no, or no, no codings for sentences. Yes, yes, no was the highest percentage, which means that she's not changing very much of the meaning of the story as she is going through it. Her syntactic and semantic acceptability was 100% on both. Meaning change were some of those words that she added in, or like call phone earlier, or when she said that Arthur was walking around taking knots and talking to himself. 47% of her miscues were self-corrected. 29% were uncorrected with meaning change, which was a big red flag to me that we needed to go back and maybe continue to have some discussions about meaning while reading. I'm now going to give you an idea about what Cadence and I discussed during her retrospective miscue analysis with this sentence of Arthur walked around the house making notes and talking to himself.
At home, Arthur walked around the house making knots and...
That's not what you just whispered to yourself, though, was it? What did you say? Notes. So when you read knots, why do you think you made that miscue?
Because it's like, it looks like knots because it has a knot in it, and then it has an ES.
And you know that ES makes what sound?
S.
It makes the S sound. So when you read that, were you thinking about, did that make sense in the story? Or were you thinking, does that look right?
It doesn't look right.
Does it look right? And when you were reading a story, do you think it's more important to ask yourself if it's making sense or if it looks right? If it makes sense. So let's read this how you read it. At home, Arthur walked around the house making knots and talking to himself. Does that sound like something somebody would do? Probably not. And you can also use the clues in the pictures, which you used a little bit later on when you were retelling your story. What's he doing?
Like a pencil and a book.
Yeah, he's got a pencil and like a little notepad over there. So using those picture clues, you could have figured out that he's not walking around his house making knots. He's walking around his house making
Notes.
Yeah.
The last thing you're going to do is create a list of your readers' literacy strengths, their areas of needs, and make some recommendations for future lessons, possibly. As you can see, Cadence had quite a few literacy strengths, including her self-correction percentage at 47%. She pauses at words that she doesn't know and attempts to figure them out. Her semantic and syntactic acceptability was 100% throughout the text. Those are some literacy strengths. Some areas of need that Cadence has is obviously to make sure that she is reading for meaning, and I would hope to help her raise her independent reading level. Some recommendations that I had for Cadence were to help her find some right fit reading books for her. She typically reads stories that are below her independent reading level. And I thought using the repeated reading strategy might help her gain some confidence while she is reading. And I also want to encourage her love of collaboration with books by continuing to allow her to participate in book clubs. Overall, I felt that the Procedure 3 Miscue Analysis helped me become a more effective evaluator of my students' reading abilities and become a better reading teacher. Thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to hearing your comments.